This video is brought to you by SoccerPro.com, offering everyday low prices on all the latest soccer gear with no membership fees. Don't forget to use coupon code SR4U at checkout for 10% off any order of $75 or more. Hey guys, Josh from SoccerReviewsForYou.com, bringing you a comparison video today between the Nike Hypervenom Phelon and the Nike Mercurial Victory 4. Obviously, we are still waiting for the Nike Hypervenom Phantom to arrive. I should have that in very shortly, but in the meantime I thought it would be cool to compare the Phelon, which is the takedown model in the Hypervenom line, and the Victory, which is a takedown model in the Mercurial series. Now, to talk about the Mercurial Victory 4, it is arguably one of, if not the most popular low-end soccer shoe currently out there on the market. It has a retail price of $70 US, and for that price you're actually getting a pretty decent soccer shoe. As far as the Hypervenom Phelon goes, it retails at $75 US, so it is $5 more than the Victory at retail price. But for the most part, I feel like the quality that you're getting on the Phelon is just a little bit better than what you're going to get from the Victory 4. So for that $5 price increase, it definitely might be worth your while to check out the Hypervenom Phelon if you are on a little bit of a budget and you're looking for something half decent. Now, as far as the uppers go on both of these two shoes, they're actually completely different. The upper material used on the Victory 4 is kind of the default name that any company gives for their synthetic material. They call it synthetic leather. It by no means is this like a leather in terms of how it feels or how it looks, and it's not even close to what you're going to get from the Tahitian synthetic found on the higher end models in the Mercurial series either. Basically what it is, it's a layered synthetic. It does have a fairly stiff, slightly rigid feel about it. You'll find that when you wear this and start bending your foot, there's a lot of creasing in the synthetic itself, which is not unusual, but it just doesn't have that natural softness that you would expect from a higher end synthetic or even a natural material. It does have not necessarily a padded feel, but it doesn't have a thin feel either. It's kind of right in there in between. It doesn't have much natural padding to it. So for the most part, you still get that very responsive feel from the shoe that you might get from a higher end Mercurial. And then, of course, depending on the colorway, you will get Nike's brand new speed control dimpling on the upper itself, which is basically a little bit of a finish here. It's not as prominent as what you're going to find on the top end Vapor model, but it still does have a slightly noticeable impact when making touches on the ball, which is always a good thing. And another thing worth mentioning, and a lot of people don't seem to understand this, is that it does not feature ACC all conditions control. You only get that feature on the top end models from Nike, never on any of the takedowns. Now, as far as the Hypervenom Phelon goes, it uses what's called a trophy synthetic, and you can see a little bit here on the side profile that for the most part it doesn't have too many layers. You have your top layer, which is obviously the graphics on the shoe that give it its color. You have this white layer in the middle that isn't overly thin, but it's not overly thick either, and you can see there's a little layer of black there, and that is the internal liner of the shoe itself. So for the most part, it doesn't feel overly bulky. There aren't too many layers here, and it feels pretty soft, especially after break-in time. Both of these shoes from right out of the box do feel a little bit rigid, to be completely honest with you, especially in comparison to some of the higher end models and higher end synthetics that are available. But once you break it in, I found that the Hypervenom Phelon actually does have a pretty good feel about it with this brand new trophy synthetic upper. You can see that you do have kind of this honeycomb / waffle pattern here going across the upper on this orange section. It does give the shoe somewhat of a unique feel in terms of touches on the ball. It has a matte finish. It has that little bit of extra texture. It gives it a slightly more cushioned feel than what you're going to find from the Mercurial Victory 4, and that's something that I personally prefer. It might not necessarily be your preference, but for my own personal preferences, I definitely like the feel of the slightly softer trophy synthetic as opposed to the synthetic leather used on the Victory 4. Now, to talk about lacing systems very quickly, you can see that the Mercurial Victory 4 uses a central lacing system that I feel is more accommodating to pretty much all foot types. It's not an overly wide cut shoe at all through the midfoot, but for the most part you will be able to fit in this shoe fairly comfortably, given that you don't have an overly wide foot. Whereas on the Hypervenom Phelon, you can see that it has a much more shallow lacing system. It's kind of pushed to the outside, and the shoe itself, in terms of how it fit, is much more reliant on the overall shape of the boot as opposed to the lacing system, mainly because you don't have that much customization across the midfoot or forefoot, and for that reason as well, it definitely has a slightly tighter feel, a more low profile feel in the forefoot and toe box area, which is a good thing if you're comparing it to a high-end shoe. But if you're looking for something that is a little bit more roomy, perhaps more comfortable depending on your kind of preferences, it's not going to feel the same as the Victory 4. You can especially see here, just showing it like that, that it is cut a little bit more narrow. The toe box is a little bit lower on the Hypervenom Phelon than it is on the Victory 4. So it has a higher quality fit in my opinion, but again, that depends on your own personal preferences as to whether you want a slightly more roomy fit or a slightly tighter fit in the Phelon. As far as the sole plate and stud patterns go, something that's unique about the Mercurial line is that pretty much every takedown model has a different stud pattern. So the Victory stud pattern is different from the Veloce, and the Veloce stud pattern is different from the top-end Vapor. Now, as far as the sole plate on here, it's made out of a TPU plastic, which is not unusual for a takedown model. You have your 4 studs, or what makes up your 4-foot area of the stud pattern, and you have your 4 studs, 2 in the back, 2 in the front, kind of 2 right here at the toe, 1 support stud in the middle, and then of course your 4 bladed studs here in the heel. The stud pattern overall works very, very well. It's kind of a classic Mercurial stud pattern. It has tremendous grip when pushing off in pretty much any direction. Really great stud pattern overall, and definitely does the job in terms of performance on firm natural grass plane surfaces. Now, one of the upsides of the Hypervenom Phelon, if you want to call it that, is that the upside is that it doesn't necessarily change the stud pattern depending on the model that you're buying. So the Phelon stud pattern is exactly the same as what you're going to find on the top end Phantom. So that is a good thing if you want to look at it that way. It does feature the same TPU sole plate that you're going to find on the Victory, of course. And the stud pattern itself, when you kind of compare them side by side in terms of how they feel, they're actually very, very similar. If you look at the Phelon, obviously it does include these conical studs that are fairly narrow in terms of their profile, and they penetrate the ground very, very easily. But when you hold it side by side next to the Victory stud pattern, or the Mercurial stud pattern, if you will, you can see that there's actually not much of a difference in terms of how the studs are laid out. You have 1 extra stud right there, and 1 extra stud right there, but for the most part, there's a stud for every stud that there is on the Mercurial series, if that makes sense. And if you guys just take a second, look side by side, kind of match up every stud, you can see that they're all positioned very, very similarly. So for that reason as well, the performance is very similar between the two. I would say that you're going to get a little bit more maneuverability from the Hypervenom stud pattern than you will get from the Mercurial stud pattern, but for the most part, the performance is not too far apart, whichever one that you do choose. So that's pretty much it as far as the side-by-side comparison. And I'll move on to a quick weigh-in so you can see what the difference in weight is between both of these two models. For shoes that retail around the $70 mark, they're both pretty lightweight. I would say that the Hypervenom Phelon feels a touch lighter in hand, but on feet, it's very difficult to tell a difference between the two in terms of how they feel. Now, just for the sake of comparison, we're going to weigh in both of these shoes for you in real time. Keep in mind that they're both used pairs in a size 9 US, so we'll throw the Hypervenom Phelon on the scale first, and you can see that these guys weigh in at 8.15 ounces. So pretty lightweight for a shoe, like I said, that costs $75 US. So we'll take this off the scale, we'll throw on the Nike Mercurial Victory 4, and you can see that these guys weigh in at 8.5 ounces, so they weigh a little bit more than the Hypervenom Phelon on the scale, but again, the difference is very minimal and nothing that you're going to be able to tell when you are wearing the shoes on your feet. So that's pretty much it as far as the weigh-in portion of this video goes, and I'll move on to a quick on feet so you can get a better idea as to how these shoes fit and what the sizing is like. Alright, here's a look at the Mercurial Victory 4s and the Hypervenom Phelons on feet. And for shoes that are at that $70 to $75 price point, they both fit pretty well. The first thing that you really have to get sorted with both of these two shoes is sizing. I'm wearing a size 9 US in both of these shoes, and they definitely have a tighter fit about them. They tend to fit a little bit smaller than the high-end models from my experience. So you can go true to size on both of these shoes if you prefer something with a slightly tighter fit, but if you want something with a little bit more wiggle room, you definitely can go up a half size safely, especially if you're looking for something to kind of have a little bit of growing room. I would definitely recommend going up a half size. Again, this all depends on your own personal preferences. Now, as far as fit goes, when I have the shoes side by side, you definitely can tell that the Hypervenom Phelon has a slightly more streamlined, closer to the foot feel, especially in the forefoot and toe box area, whereas the toe box area on the Victory 4 is just a little bit more boxy feeling, and not necessarily low quality, but not quite as high-end feeling as what you're going to get from the Hypervenom Phelon, I guess I should say. Through the midfoot, both of these shoes are cut very, very similarly in my opinion. I would say that the Hypervenom Phelon has a slightly tighter fit through the midfoot, but the cut overall is very, very similar between both of these two shoes. So if you were wearing the Victories previously and you want to go into the Hypervenom Phelon, you will feel right at home with both of these two shoes. So that's pretty much it as far as the on-feet portion of this video goes, and I'll leave you to my final thoughts. Alright guys, that's it for my comparison between the Nike Mercurial Victory 4 and the Nike Hypervenom Phelon. If I had to pick a favorite between the two, I would probably go for the Phelon, just because it fits a little bit better and the overall quality of the synthetic I feel is a little bit better than the Victory 4 as well. Of course, it does have a $5 premium over the Victory 4, but that's not a huge difference in price. And if you have been wearing the Victory model and want to try something a little bit different, I would definitely take a look at the Hypervenom Phelon. If you are interested in picking up either of these two shoes for yourself, be sure to check out the review pages linked down below in the description. You're going to find some buy it now links with the best prices online, including some exclusive SR4U coupon codes. To get yourself some additional discounts, you'll be able to pick up both of these shoes for under retail price, making them ultra affordable. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to support it with a like. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest soccer gear. You can find all of my social media links down below in the description. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. And as always, thanks for watching.